The second session of today's activity. Today we have with us Dr. Rikumantra Basu. Uh, Before starting this session, let me introduce our eminent speaker to all of you. Dr. Basu received his BSc, BTech and MTech degree from University of Calcutta. He joined the Center for Research in Nanoscience and Nanotechnology of CU as a SRF in 2009 and then as a CSIR SRF to complete his PhD in nano in 2013. Immediately after PhD, he served as an assistant professor in BITS Pilani during 2013 to 14, and then he joined EC department of NIT Delhi in December 2014, which is still continuing that. His research area includes modeling and simulation of novel optoelectronic devices like transistor lasers, heterophototransistors, group 4 photonics, and VLSI design. He has number of journal and conference publications and book chapters in the edited volume. He has co-authored a book, Semiconductor Laser Theory, CRC, Taylor and Francis, 2015, and also adopted the books Semiconductor Electronic Devices by Streetman and Banerjee in 2016. He was a Young Scientist awardee by USI's General Assembly 2012, held in Istanbul, Turkey. He spent the summer of 2014 in University of Bristol for research and he also visited Canada, USA, Korea, and at the name of few countries from institutions at various places to present his research work. Currently, he has two sponsored projects under Indo-Taiwan DST bilateral project since 2015 and CERT DST project from 2017 under the Early Career Research Grant. Dr. Basu is a member of IEEE, APS, and OSA, and served as a reviewer of many journals, namely IEEE JQE, IEEE PTL, Electronic Letter, IET Optoelectronic Journal by Elsevier, and acted as a judge for poster presentation at NUSOD 2017 at Copenhagen. Sir, we welcome you all for this lecture and we request you to share your vast knowledge with our participants. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Am I audible properly?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Vinita. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Vinita and Dr. Amit Garg, coordinators of this AICT-sponsored one-week workshop of high-speed optical links and photonic devices for next-generation data transmission. All the officials of IIIT Quota, as well as the concerned officials of AI for conducting this Atal FDP program. Thank you very much for a brief and nice introduction of myself. As the introduction suggests, I'm a little bit of photonic devices person, and we also have shared a very good career opportunity with Dr. Vinita during our time at BITS Pilani in 2013 and 14. So in light of that, today I will just going to present rather than I would like to going to discuss with all the participants the next generation photonic devices using direct gap group 4 alloys as a replacement for the contemporary 3-5 compound semiconductor based devices. So I would also like to welcome the participants. Very good afternoon to all of you. I'm sure you are doing any faculty researches and faculty profiles in many of the organizations or academic organizations across the country. So that's why my topic I would like to limit it as a discussion with you, a sharing of information between all of us. I'm not throwing with any high-end research results and blah, 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 so that it will become a high-end topic. And I will correspondingly start with very basic and try to give a little bit of enhancement in the photonic devices, particularly in the material aspects, what the current technology is going. If we talk about the next generation data transmission or whatever it is utilized in case of an optical fiber communication. So is the slide changes visible properly? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Fine. So I have divided my presentation, the sections of the presentation. So first, what we mean by a photonics and what are the contemporary photonic devices nowadays going on. The second section will be the importance of the material selection while we are designing the photonic devices, which is a very crucial part on contrary to the electronic devices. And we will try to find it out some novel materials which are now helpful nowadays for the choosing of the photonic devices. And I will conclude with the section 3, how we can use those novel materials in some of the new next generation photonic devices. Although there are many, but I will try to emphasize one or two maximum so that we can proceed and give you an insight of the modern upliftment in the photonics technology. So let's start with the very basic photonics and the contemporary photonic devices. So what is basically photonics? Nothing but a study of an application of electronic devices that interact with photons. By the way, applicants, since the participants, since I told this is just a discussion, so you may interrupt me at any time, whether you want to discuss anything, whether it's relevant, irrelevant, any kind of questions. Don't be shy at all. So certain kind of an electronic devices which interact with the photons. So it is basically an amalgamation of electronics and photonics, contributing with the devices like telecommunication lasers, blue lasers, optical fiber, light emitting diodes which are used in traffic lights or lighting purposes, photodiodes, solar cells. So they have a various purposes of use in the light transmitters as well as in the light receivers. So direct conversion between the electrons and photons are the goals of the major optoelectronic devices. We know the basic applications of such optoelectronic devices where we have a pure semiconductor structure, valence band filled up with electrons, or and conduction band either free or partially free with the electrons, and we have to provide certain kind of an external excitation in terms of a light, in terms of a bias, so that electrons can jump from the valence band to the conduction band, and after certain subject to the conditions, the electrons will again come back, recombine with the holes, because the absence of electrons from the valence band to conduction band will create it as a holes. So the transited electrons will make a recombination with the holes, and as a result of light is emitted in case of a direct bandgap semiconductors. Not every semiconductors, direct bandgap semiconductors. And this is a very basic, very brief understanding of what is the major principle of operation of the optoelectronic devices. And if you look carefully, the purpose of these optoelectronic devices are to serve the purpose of the major application is the transmission of optical data, because photon speed is much higher speed with less of electromagnetic interference. They can, with a very minimum number of time, they can carry a huge number of data. And if we talk about to support the optical fiber communication, then we have at least or majorly two classification of optoelectronic devices, either in the form of transmitters, light emitting diodes for displaying lightning, or laser diodes for the data storage, telecommunication purposes, and at the last end side as the detectors, the photodiodes, telecommunication detections, solar cells for the energy conversions, which have a variety of applications of optical storage, data and information transmission, processing, medical, defense, surveillance. So those are the very basic classification we all know about the optoelectronic devices. So that gives us the goal of the photonics, which deals with the generation and harnessing of the light or the photons. Like electron contributes to the subject electronics, similarly photon contributes to the subject photonics. And these are the photonic devices which are mainly used either in the form of optical source or modulator, which transmitted through the optical fiber or the free space. There is a free space optical communication as well in terms of the medium. And then finally, they are detected through a photodetector in the receiver. The attenuated signals are amplified through an amplifier, and then it finally reaches to the load, where we can again, the optoelectron, due to the optoelectronic conversion, it has been converted into an electrical signal to retrieve our data. And the major application is optical communication, computer, machining, entertainment, businesses, medical purposes, each and everything. And that was completely possible with maybe these two fellow gentlemen. Charles Cow, the Nobel laureate 2009, was the inventor of the optical fiber. Ale Shallow in 1981, who was the inventor of the optical maser. This is a typical optical fiber, which will look, since I'm going from the very basics, I thought I should share the basic pictures. So this is an optical fiber, although the optical fibers are basically the small thin fibers which you are observing at the front, and those are cabled through many layers of jackets so that there will be no possibility of the harms in the data transmission or the erosion in the optical fiber. So this is a simple block diagram. If we elaborate in terms of the source, the drive circuitry, optical source, then the data are transmitted through the connector, then optical splicer or couplers are there, then they're received in the receiver where there is an optical receiver, optical to electronics conversion, optical, again it goes to the optical amplifier, detector, and then finally to the sink. And definitely the practical optical fiber has many attenuation and the bandwidth, and as we know, the preferable operation is 1.55 micrometer due to its low attenuation and low loss, which is providing the best suitable telecommunication wavelength, although 1.33 micrometer is also in the family to provide the best suitable or the possible optical communication wavelength range. So this is a typical point-to-point link between a laser and a receiver, which are coupled through several regenerators, and usually we use single mode here it is shown single mode fiber for a point-to-point link, although we shows the multi-mode fibers where we have to transmit data from one source to another. We also have seen the wavelength division and multiplexing point-to-point link, where we can actually modulate our electrical signals, many electrical signals, using different lasers. Laser will act as a carrier signal, while we will multiply with the basic message signal to uplift that or modulate those signals into some higher carrier frequency, lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3. We have connected through a mux to combine that. When we amplify those through the optical amplifiers, then we transmit through the demux, and finally after the demux, again at the decoder site, it is decoded using the same laser frequency and phase match to go to the minimum various channels of the receivers. This is just a practical scenario of the optical fiber transmission, which are being actually being transmitted through the transoceanic systems, like all our oceans, Pacific oceans, Arabian oceans, every oceans are full of, or the beneath of the oceans are full of optical fibers, which are carrying our data from one continent to another continent. So this is a very brief about the optical fiber communication. Now, once we are using this optical fiber communication, two of the major components, as I have told, we have to rely on the optical sources and the optical detectors. So I will give you a very brief examples. I'm sure you are all accustomed with that, but that will give the base of our further advancement of the topic. So optical sources, as I told you, nothing but a device sourcing the light, source of luminescence. Luminescence means the generation of the light, where we have three classifications: photoluminescence through the fluorescence tube, where we can use a excitation mechanism through a external light source, laser usually. Example is a fluorescent tube. Cathodoluminescence, used in a cathode ray tube, where you can use the high energy electron bombardment. Electroluminescence, where we use the bias or the battery, like we use in case of a light emitting diode or lasers in those cases. So those are the different optical sources. And as we know, the optical sources, the basic processes of light matter interaction, which I had already discussed. where LED mostly serves with the spontaneous emission, laser serves with the stimulated emission, and the photodetector serves with the absorption to create the electron hole pair. And that is governed by the simple empirical formula lambda equals to C by V, that is Hc by C by nu, or 1.24 by H nu. H nu is in electron volt and micrometer, which gives us for any unknown semiconductor material what should be the wavelength of operation if you know the band gap H nu, or vice versa if you know the band gap, or if you know the wavelength of operation, then what will be the band gap, where intraband and interband transitions are actually happening within the stimulated emission. So stimulated emission is basically a photon energy impinges on atom under the excited state. The atom can be stimulated to make a transition to the ground state and give off a photon which is in phase with the incident radiation. Yes,
नहीं
I'm sorry.
Participants, please mute yourself.
कमी तो अच्छा ये वॉल्यूम फुल है और तूने भी यहाँ से वॉल्यूम कम है अब बोल
I proceed. You please switch off your microphone if you don't have any question to ask.
We are doing, sir. We are doing.
Fine. So, I mean, for the participants, if you know, I mean, can we just share or discuss a little bit what is the difference between a spontaneous emission and a stimulated emission? Any rough idea? I mean, what is the basic difference of the principle of operation between an LED and a laser? Anyone? I mean, just a discussion. I'm not asking any question.
Basically, sir, the stimulated emission is by force or that is by requirement, and spontaneous is by chance. Basically,
And who is giving that force?
that is some another photons basically, but undesirable.
The another photon, basically. Dr. Amit, you are the coordinator. Let's the participants should discuss with that. So
Okay, yeah.
any other option?
Sir,
Any other option?
by population inversion.
By population inversion. Population inversions are created in both cases of stimulated and spontaneous emission.
But in the spontaneous case, the energy in the number of photons in the or number of electrons in the excited state is less than that in the ground state in the spontaneous. So
Yes, partially correct, because in both the cases we are providing certain kind of an external excitation, light, or usually a laser light, even for a laser light or a bias to generate that. But what happens in case of a spontaneous emission, whatever electrons is making a transition from conduction band to valence band, after its carrier lifetime, it's coming back spontaneously. It is making a recombination within the hole. As a result of that, if the semiconductor is a direct band gap semiconductor, the light is emitting, but that light has got spread out. The output light has got spread out at any direction. We cannot control that. That is the basic principle of LED, spontaneous emission. What
Sir,
we do
I
in case
think
of a
so,
laser, yes.
Sir, the light emitted by the LED may be of more than one color or of many colors, but
Yes,
laser
yes,
emits
correct.
only monochromatic one.
Yes, but that is a basic structural difference. I have asked the difference between the spontaneous and stimulated emission. You're correct in case of a structurally. Because since the light has been dispersed in many directions, so that's why LED produces many wavelengths of light. And it's dispersed, and that's why it is used in lighting purposes. जैसे आजकल हमारा airport display, street light display, all are governed by the LEDs, not by the lasers. Laser mein what we do, the structural change, we put it in an enclosed cavity to reflecting parallel mirrors or surfaces, so that whatever the first generation or the first photon is being generated, that usually generated with the spontaneous emission process, even in the laser. But that first photon then starts reflected hence and forth between the two parallel surfaces, and that first photon acts as an internal excitation to generate the second photon. Then again, the second photon acts as an internal excitation to generate the third photon. Meanwhile, your external laser is also on. So internally, multiple photons are generated. externally photons are also coming. So at the output, there is an addition of photons which you are getting. So that is providing the amplification. And of course, the coming out of the photons, there should be subject to the condition, there should be phase and frequency matched. The photon traversal within the cavity must be the half of the integral wavelength, or of the equivalent to the cavity length. Those are photons which are satisfying these, they can only come out. So that is the difference of the stimulated emission and spontaneous emission. And due to that stimulated emission, only one particular frequency is coming out. And that's why lasers are used for the surgery for a particular component, metal cutting, other things where we do not require any distributed propagation of the light. And that only can be possible when we provide an absorption. The basic condition, we have to provide a light, or we have to fall upon a light which should be greater than the band gap of that semiconductor. So absorption of the photons, carriers go to the excited states, electron hole pairs are generated in case of a bulk, and electrons and holes are generated in case of a nanostructure, and correspondingly the simple animation has been shown how in case of absorption happens, and it created the further light generation. We also use different advanced structures like nanostructures, where our conduction band and valence band, since we know these are the collection of various energy subbands, so we can use interband transition, that is a transition from valence band to conduction band, or we can use the intraband or inter-subband transition, where within the conduction band one sub-energy level to other sub-energy level, electron can make a transition, and correspondingly there might be a generation of the photon. Usually in case of intraband or inter-subband, we use quantum cascade lasers for high frequency wavelength of operations. And of course, as I told you, if h nu less than Eg, there is no absorption. And if there is a proper absorption, proper transition, then there is a carrier drop to the normal state. Energy is being released, which is the emission of the photon or light, the radiative transition. And there is no radiative transition if the light, if we are taking the indirect bandgap semiconductor, the energy is being lost through the spectral recombination, Auger recombination with all those processes. And based upon that, I have already discussed the principle of the light emitting diode. I'm not going into the detail. The same principle, although we have to use a direct bandgap semiconductor materials. And if we have to choose the photonic materials in terms of that, we usually use, this is a very beautiful tabular form, gallium phosphide, gallium arsenide, aluminum gallium nitride, indium gallium nitride, which also provides different emission wavelengths of color for the light emitting diodes, as well as their emission range to visualize the picture within the UV region for the photonic devices, particularly for the LED. Further advanced structures can be possible. Talk about a heterojunction LED. What is basically a heterojunction? I mean, if I will ask you what is, if we talk about a heterojunction, what do we mean by a heterojunction?
Multiple PN junctions, sir, with
Multiple?
different refractive index properties.
No, different refractive index is, I guess, used in an optical fiber. Optical fiber is not a heterojunction. A simple heterojunction, like heterojunction bipolar transistor also. What is a heterojunction structure?
Multiple PN junctions.
Multiple PN junctions. Is there any specific characteristics of this multiple PN
So it
junctions?
should able to guide the light or electrons. The structure, overall structure.
No, actually, heterojunctions is basically a lower bandgap material must be sandwiched between two higher bandgap materials, so that if the structure, so that whatever the electrons are coming from the higher bandgap material, those are captured within the lower bandgap material. They cannot surmount the potential hill, so that they can go into the next structure or the next higher structure. If I'm not wrong, I'm just trying to draw something. Is it visible to all of you? I'm drawing something. Is it visible to all of you?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I have just switched my laptop, so that's where the ceiling is visible only. So this is a heterojunction. So if we have two higher band gap materials is sandwiched between and in between a lower band gap material is sandwiched, then we call it a heterojunction, so that the electrons can fall down within the lower band gap material. They cannot surmount easily. They are being trapped and they have only way to go to the downstairs, recombine with the hole, and as a result of that, they can only produce light. So that is the effective way we can produce the channelized form of the light. That is the purpose of the heterojunction structures. So there are different types of heterojunction structures, like light emitting diode, heterojunction light emitting diode, each and everything. Further discovery made in case of a semiconductor laser. The gradual discovery of the semiconductor laser was identified in 1962, correspondingly through the GE, gallium arsenide by R.N. Hall, gallium arsenide phosphide by Nick Holoniuk Jr. IBM then comes with gallium arsenide laser by Professor Nathan, and MIT Lincoln after that gallium arsenide Rediker. So Holoniuk alloy laser and LED produced a visible red light. That was his remarkable achievement, where the identification of the stimulated emission process with the cavity occurs in direct bandgap semiconductors. So this is the typical picture where R.N. Hall, Nick Holoniuk, Nathan, all those groups can, even in the 1962, they have started demonstrating one by one the generation of the lasers. There are different kinds of lasers. I am not going into the details since our purpose is not to just to summarize the existing photonic devices. So high intensity coherent light emission, and the basic mechanism is the population inversion. The coherent emission is possible by the optical resonator, as I told you, by utilizing a Fabry-Perot resonator cavity. And for that, the Nobel Prize was awarded by Zores Alferov of Russia and Herbert Kroemer of California for developing the semiconductor heterostructures using in high-speed optoelectronics. In 2000, Nobel Prize, along with Professor Jack Kilby, who first invented the integrated circuit, because that gives the first concept, the amalgamation of various electronic components. Although till now the technology of the integrated circuits is restricted with the amalgamation of various electronic components within the structure. Then scientists also evolved with various nanostructures, advanced dimensionality with 3D. If it is a 3D, the normal devices which we use the bulk structures. If it is a 2D, thin film or quantum well. If it is a 1D, nanowire structure. If it is a 0-dimensional, that is a quantum dot. And the corresponding density of states functions are also being shown. The dimensionality is being changed here only. If the bulk is 3-dimensionally, can be of any dimension, usually of the micrometer range. But in case of a 2D, actually what happens, you restrict one dimension among the 3 dimensions of the device to a nanometric range. Nanometric range means within 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer. If you can fix one dimension among the 3 dimensions of a device within 1 to 100 nanometer, then the movement of the electrons are restricted only into the other 2 dimensions. That's why this is called a 2D structure or a 2D electron gas. Similarly, if you can restrict 2 of the dimensions in the nanometric range, then only 1 dimension of the movement of the electrons are possible. Then it becomes a 1D structure, nanowire. And if you restrict all the dimensions for the electron movement, then it becomes a 0-dimensional electron gas or quantum dot. So those are actually in the nanometric range. Before we proceed, can I just ask you, I mean, if I will ask you a very basic concept of what is the range of nanometer, if I will ask you? I mean, don't tell me 1 nanometer is 1/10 to the power minus 9 meter. From any practical aspect, what is, can you define a nanometer? Any example, practical example? Anyone?
So less than 0.1 micrometer.
Less than 0.1 micrometer. How do you have any scale in the micrometer range or nanometer range? Can you measure that practically? Less than any micrometer is nanometer. I mean, if I will ask you,
hydrogen atom equal to 1 nanometer.
do we really work in the laboratory with a hydrogen atom?
Sir, any
Possible?
structure, for any structure
No.
with at least one dimension, less
No,
than
that is
100
very fine.
nanometer, 100 nanometers.
Then it is a nanometric device. But I am asking, what is the physical concept of a nanometer? I mean, do you find any practical example, any practical device, any practical object in our lifestyle, which we call it a nanometer? If you take one human hair and put, if possible for you, to make a 10,000 cross section, then actually one cross section corresponds to 100 nanometer. That is, although not very good, but a favorable practical example of a nanometer. So people started working with this semiconductor nanostructures, or they have trying to reduce down the dimensions in various dimensions of a 3D bulk devices in the nanometer dimension, whether it's quantum well structure, whether it's quantum wire structure, whether it's quantum dot structures. And based on that, they have landed up with the quantum well, quantum wire, quantum dot, all those photonic devices. Similarly, the photodetectors in the last part, where the absorption of the light provides and converts the optical into the electricity, which is the classifications is a number of junctions, wavelength range, transition states. And the photodetectors can be classified into two types, either with no internal gain, normal PN junction, PIN diode, Schottky diode. And if you provide with an amplification, then it is a photoconductor, avalanche photodiode, phototransistors. So photodiode is, again, if you apply a simple bias, and the depletion region actually acts as the active region to convert your transited photon, or the vibration of the photons actually encounters with the vibrations within the resistances, which contributes to the equivalent amount of current generation. I'm not going into the details. These are the junction photodiodes. Then we have PIN photodiodes, where an intrinsic region has been incorporated in between the P-type and N-type semiconductor to actually widen the depletion region. Intrinsic region. The depletion region is governed by the depletion approximation, means there are no free charge carriers. And by applying huge amount of reverse bias, you cannot increase the depletion width. The diode can go to the breakdown region or burnt out. So we purposefully introduce an intrinsic region to increase the effective area of the operation. So the PIN diode, there is Schottky photodiode as well, where metal semiconductor junctions can be used as a Schottky photodiode. If you want a gain, photodetector, automatic gain of the converted photons to the electrons, then we can use the avalanche photodiode. And further advanced structures is a phototransistor, where the similar NPN or PNP transistor structures are used. And if you can apply certain light from the outside, that can also contribute in the generation of the current. I will land it up in my section 3 with some advanced structure of this phototransistor based devices only, where lies incident on the base. The emitter base junction is forward bias, base collector junction is reverse bias. That also provides an electrical gain, but also certain optical output as well. With a detected electrical or amplified electrical output, which provides a uniform gain with bias, although there are several disadvantages of large dark current, moderate bandwidth, all those things. Now that gives us our complete section 2, which gives us what are the present photonic devices which we are actually playing in our day-to-day study or in our day-to-day life. But we forgot one important thing. Designing a photonic devices, only a direct bandgap semiconductor will not suffice the purpose. There is a very precise role of the selection of the material in the photonic devices, and if you can go for certain novel material selection out of the next generation technology. So I will first go with the normal materials which the current photonic industry are using, then certain advancement or the proposals in which the present researches or the future researches are going on. So if we go for a general brightness, super brightness, ultra brightness, And the various ranges of production of the light, red, green, blue, yellow, these type of materials are usually being given if it is a light emitter, the left hand side table. Whereas if we go for the photo detection range in the materials, we still believe on the silicon, germanium, because the reason is silicon is quite abundantly freely available in the nature, as well as for very low cost, as well as we can use a little bit of indium gallium arsenide, lead sulfide, and the possible wavelength range of operations are also given. A little bit of idea about those materials. We use group 2,6 compounds: zinc oxide, zinc sulfide, zinc selenide, zinc telluride, cadmium sulfide, where band gaps are ranging from 1.5 electron volt to 3.54 electron volt. The perspective is silicon has a band gap of only 1.1, gallium arsenide 1.4 electron volt. So a wider band gap is one of the good properties that these materials have in common, which can be utilized in LEDs, signal processing units, etc. There are group 3,5 ternary and quaternary compounds, which are mostly available in the market while producing your light emitters. Certain examples of ternary compounds: indium gallium arsenide, gallium phosphide. Plenty of examples are given where it is a ternary alloys, where the band gap, energy, and the lattice parameters are generally both functions of a single composition parameter, so they can be selected independently. In case of a quaternary alloys, the two composition parameters allow band gap and to be selected independently within the constraints of alloy. We have to grow on a certain substrate system. There is another class of material, group 3 nitrides. Group 3 nitrides have an advantage of very wide band gap materials, and they can be crystallized in both woodside and zinc blend prototypes. They are consistent with high temperature and high power electronic applications like radar missiles, satellites, as well as low cost compact amplifiers for wireless base stations, with excellent electron transport property, good mobility, high saturated drift velocity. Although there is a little drawback in case of a group 3 nitride materials, they usually generate the electric fields in a very high region that automatically helps to bend the energy bands, that is a conduction band and valence band. There are different types of glasses for photonic integration, like BIG, Z-blan, 2G selenide glasses, various types of glasses. Usually optical fiber is nothing but a type of glasses, only silica glasses. For plasmonic sensors, applications with glass substrate and prisms are used. So that gives you a very broad overview. Currently, the industry is struggling with many such materials with which we can really design those photonic devices. Let me just again go with certain kind of writing discussions for your understanding. Is the slide visible?
Yes, sir.
Visual, sir.
Yeah. Those are the basic materials we had discussed. All the present photonic industry are using. But what are the real challenges the industry is facing? So I have completed my section 1 with a general discussion of the photonic devices. Now I have given you in the section 2, this is the first part of the completion of the second section 2, that what are the different materials currently the market or the industry are using. And now I'm coming to the further advancement. What are the actual challenges the industries are facing? I have made a comparison. The photonics industry and the electronic industry are completely. The reason is why photonic industry depends on the direct bandgap semiconductor materials, whereas the electronic industry are dependent on indirect bandgap semiconductor materials, preferably the silicon and the germanium. What is the difference in between a direct and an indirect bandgap semiconductor material? If we talk about from the simple EK diagram, what is the difference between a direct band gap and an indirect band gap material? Anyone?
In case of direct band gap material,
Mhm.
the momentum is also conserved when the electron falls from a higher energy level to lower energy level. In case
Fine.
of indirect, a phonon is involved in the process. So to conserve the momentum.
Okay, but that is partially correct. You are true. Only momentum is conserved?
No, even energy conservation happens.
No, not even. Particularly energy and momentum both.
Yes.
So if you have
both.
to
Correct.
tell, you have to both the minima of the conduction band and the maximum of the
Maximum of
valence
the-
band should
Yes.
occur at the same momentum position, and the energy and momentum both are conserved in case of a
Correct.
direct band gap semiconductor, which is
Very true.
completely opposite in case of an indirect band gap semiconductor. And that's the reason it provides the output as a light, and indirect band gap semiconductor in terms of a heat or in terms of a phonon. So light or photon in case of a direct band gap, phonon in terms of an indirect band gap. But if we look into the market trend, photonics is quite costly, because gallium arsenide, it is made up of 3-5 compounds, gallium arsenide, indium gallium arsenide, all those things. Those are pretty costly materials, and the vendors or the industry have to pay a lot to make all those photonic devices. Whereas electronic industry, you will find many, because by relying on silicon and germanium, you can make it that easily, because silicon is abundantly available in nature. That is the reason. So what is the advantage, or what kind of a challenges from the late 2000s? Some of the major industries have started looking for, specifically the IBM and the Intel. Is it possible we can make a perfect integration of the electronic industry and the photonic industry, so that silicon, a typical, or a germanium, a typical indirect bandgap semiconductor material, we can do something that can also produce light. And in that case, in the same silicon or germanium chip, we will be capable to produce the electronic circuitry as well as the photonic circuitry, or the electronic device and the photonic device. That two advantages: huge reduction of the cost, as well as very powerful or further small compact integration or miniaturization of the circuitry. Still, whatever the laptops or mobile phones we are utilizing, that is also very huge, because within our laptop, within our mobile phones, from one layer to another layer of chips, we are still communicating with the copper interconnects. Still we are doing. If we can replace with if we can develop on the silicon itself the photonic devices, then we can use a optical fiber instead of the optical metallic interconnects or the copper interconnects. The speed of the operation will also go fast. With this sort of thinking, actually, the new generation electronics comes into the picture, which is the evolvement of the silicon photonics. The name is quite awkward. Obvious question will come. Silicon is an indirect bandgap material. How it can provide photonics? But with this certain progress the industry have made to come up with this new branch of technology, silicon photonics, or it is also known as a group 4 photonics. Let's have an aspect. What is this silicon photonics and group 4 photonics? Group 4 photonics is a monolithic implementation of light emitters and detectors with CMOS compatible electronics platform, because main of our electronics are challenged with CMOS transistors only. And the idea is to integrate fully compatible group 4 materials with equally favorable group 3-5 based systems. And IBM, mainly IBM, started with these kind of a challenge. So we have to find, if we have to overcome this challenge, we have to find the problem, then the solution will automatically come. The problem is silicon is an indirect bandgap semiconductor material, that we know. And the problems with the silicon is a poor emitter. Indirect nature of the bandgap needs phonons for momentum conservation. Uske baad bhi momentum conservation is not that much of a good. a large recombination lifetime limits the modulation bandwidth. The linear electro-optic effects are absent in silicon and germanium, and it has a cutoff wavelength at 1100 nanometer, which is far below the present day telecommunication wavelength, 1550 nanometer. The reason is the conduction valleys. This is, if we call it the conduction valleys, are located away from the center of the Brillouin zone. Basically, in case of indirect bandgap semiconductor, the electrons are located in the L valley of the conduction band, where the gamma valley conduction band and valence band are actually almost at the same momentum positions. So in silicon, 6 valleys located. A phonon or a defect must provide the momentum for absorption or emission, and confinement along the z direction, that is spread in the momentum z envelope functions, have seizable Fourier component, so no phonon needed, so quasi-direct no phonon transitions. So that actually gives a bound excitation trapped in the nitrogen gallium phosphide. That is a basic problem with the silicon. But if we look, or if we can shift our little bit of focus from the silicon, and if we take our concentration on the germanium, a similar category old material, but with a prospect of new applications. Germanium has a quite small direct band gap of 0.8 electron volt at 1.55 nanometer wavelength, where silicon has quite large 2.3 electron volt. It shows a quasi-direct band gap material nature in 136 milli electron volt. And germanium is also fully compatible with the silicon technology. So these three aspects actually provide us the germanium can act as a potential candidate for an alternate based silicon based photodetectors or 3,5 compound based light emitters by overcoming the challenging problem over the decades due to indirect nature of the band gap in silicon or silicon germanium alloys. But alone germanium cannot do that struggle. What we have done, and there are further aspects as well, or further advantages as well. Germanium has very high electron mobility and high hole mobility in comparison to silicon. That gives us a promise for high speed devices in comparison to the silicon. IC fabrication technology gives silicon the advantage over germanium, where the germanium photodetector spectral range is within 1.3 to 1.5 micrometer of narrow band gap of 0.8 electron volt. And it has a very good responsivity at the 1.5, not only at the 1.55 micrometer, but also in the higher region. Although initially the experiment was started with silicon germanium alloys, but that shows higher mobilities due to strain. Those are useful for the channel materials in the FETs, but that doesn't show a very promising lattice matching, or shows a very high lattice mismatch, the silicon germanium alloys over the germanium, and that's why the strain developed a huge and the system didn't become stable. So scientists carry on one by one the further experimentation, what can be done with the germanium. Then they actually come back with a very interesting idea. They started incorporating a favorable amount of tin, or they are increasing a tin concentration within a single germanium crystal. So a germanium tin alloy can be grown, usually with a tin concentration of more than 6%. It has been observed that the germanium tin or the silicon germanium tin developed on the virtual substrate of silicon provides a direct nature of the band gap. That gives a very, very fantastic result innovated by the IBM and other companies. So that left-hand side figure shows, as I told you, there are there are L valley electrons. Let me switch to the presentation so that write it down. So if we can, sorry, just a minute. Fine. So if I can L-valley electrons, in case of a germanium, the electrons are mostly concentrated in the L-valley. However, the gamma valley conduction band is completely free. It has been observed if we can constantly increasing the electron concentration from 0% to 6%, some internal mechanism happens, although this exact physics of the internal mechanism have not been discovered yet. The electrons start shifting to the gamma valley, which was initially empty. Now, if the electrons are fulfilled within the gamma valley, fine, already the holes or the empty spaces are there, they can make a direct transition. Fine, if there is a direct transition, they are capable to provide light, which was the biggest hurdle in case of an indirect bandgap semiconductor. And that gives up the generation of this group 4 or germanium-tin mid-infrared photonics, the new challenging branch of the technology, an emerging area for developing photonic devices on silicon substrate, replacing expensive 3-5 compound devices, with the ultimate aim to obtain electronics and photonics integration on the silicon, which provides a promising for the use as CMOS, TFET, LEDs, lasers, pin detectors, and it has observed its operation can be extended up to the mid-infrared region as well. So tin alloying actually transfers the band structure from indirect to direct, as well as we will see in the next slide. The band gap energy also further reduces with the incorporation of the tin content. So we have started doing the analytical, although a little bit of experiment have been done worldwide. So in our group, we have started doing, and few with other groups, we have started doing the analytical modeling. So we have plotted the energy wave vector relationship, including the parabolic, non-parabolic models, where we have seen that the interband transition energies as increases, which decreases with the increasing tin content, there is a rate shift in the absorption edges. Rate shift in the absorption edges can also increase the absorption capability. And if we can look very carefully at, if you can see the topmost left-hand side figure, almost around the 6% of the tin concentration, the perfect crossover from the indirect to direct nature has been observed. And the strain of the germanium or alloying with the tin decreases with the indirect band gap. And we have also calculated, that is a further calculation we did. In case of an tin incorporation, the mobility in the germanium tin alloys also have increased very, very faster or higher than in comparison to the germanium tin. Am I not audible?
You are audible, sir.
Okay, somebody has written in the chat, not audible, fine. So that also increases the mobility in the bulk germanium tin. So that gives us a very promising results, and they started doing the developing on the silicon substrate with various compositions of germanium tin, silicon germanium tin, where actually the gamma to L valley crossovers happen, where actually we'll find the minimum amount of strain, so that while growing on the silicon substrate, so that we can have a stable germanium tin. So basically this configuration is with this increase of the transition of the electrons from the conduction band to the gamma band, valley conduction band, as shows that the strain-induced band edges of the silicon provides a direct band gap nature. So that solves almost the purposes, although initially that purposes cannot give us a very high intensity light. So we have to furnish further all those development. With the specific examples in the light wave communication in computers and fiber optic communications between the different cards within the IC chips, fiber to the home, and replacing the copper interconnects in the VLSI, as I am telling, because if the same photonic devices can be grown on the silicon substrate, you will connect optical fibers from one chip to another chip. The data will be automatically converted within the chip, and it will run very, very fast. So whatever actually speed we are using now, we will get extremely much higher speed in comparison with that. Some of the industry jump on the business examples I have shown: Intel, IBM, HP, Katora, Sun, IMEC, ST, Microelectronics, Alcatel, Nippon, Hitachi will started with the projects. The DARPA projects was initiated by USA, Multi-University Research Initiative, MURI. For the silicon photonics, Japan has invested in Marai Optical Interconnects project. UK with the UK Silicon Photonics under the EPSRC research body. European Union, Helios project with the 19 University. Platon project was introduced with silicon photonics or silicon surface plasmonics. BOOM project was initiated by Germany and Italy. And of course, IEEE Photonics Society separates, holding an annual Group for Photonics conference, and still scientists and industry are struggling with that because still the field is yet not matured. And they, with those struggle, Intel creates the world's first end-to-end silicon photonics connection or the chip with integrated lasers on the silicon laser integrated with silicon fiber within the chip, which could revolutionize the computer design and dramatically increase the performance of and to save energy, which was published in Santa Clara of the California in 2010. Only one chip they have produced with the challenge of 50 gigabit per second optical link speed using all devices of silicon. That means light emitting devices, light detecting devices, the other electronic components, the optical fibers, each and everything. That was the first challenge or achievement of the challenge taken by the Intel. And this is a picture of the 50 gigabit per second silicon photonics link, which was produced by the Intel. And the major idea was the long-term copper replacement. So immediately the IBM announces the silicon photonics breakthrough, and they achieved their target of 100 gigabit per second barrier within few years. And this tabular chart shows how 2013 up to 2022, what are the projections in the flops, the aggregate bandwidth, the energy transfer per bit, size, and cost in case of a replacement of the copper replacement of the optical interconnects. And definitely when industry have started, then like us, the academicians also have started doing many simulation based, analytical based, or experimental based developing of the not commercialized devices, experiment based or laboratory based devices. And these are some of the results, come up results of the industry or by the various organizations. They come up with the germanium and silicon mist diode, first reported laser action at room temperature made up of germanium, high directionality, narrow line width, and enhanced light. Laser light, although not become stable when they try to make a optically pumped germanium on silicon laser. Germanium tin laser becomes quite successful. It was published in the Nature Photonics. Most of the USA groups in 2015, they have predicted analytically, although a few bit of the experiments, this PL spectra, they have experimentally achieved the germanium tin laser. Germanium, CMOS compatible germanium tin photodetectors working at the 1.55 micrometer was published in 2011 with a good amount of responsivity of almost 2 to 3 ampere per watt, which is covering the telecommunication wavelength of 1.55 micrometer, if you can see. The germanium tin, silicon germanium tin quantum laser also started becoming popular. They actually used a multiple quantum stacks of quantum lasers. They come up with the Optic Express in 2010. And of course, since many people are doing so, I also with my research group also started doing a little bit or utilizing this novel material of germanium tin to find a novel photonic devices, because mostly are working in the normal photodiodes or the lasers to find a next generation photonic devices. That will complete my section 3, whatever little amount of work we have tried to manage it up through with the help of my students and the collaborators. So We try to do a phototransistor. Definitely in the receiver side, we try to develop a photodiode, but a transistor-based device, which is known as a heterojunction transistor, an emerging group 4 semiconductor device. Purely we use with the germanium tin, the analytical and the simulation parts we are doing here. And I have a collaboration with the National Chung Ching University of Taiwan, where they are trying to develop that HPT, although not commercially successful, but laboratory-based, a little success we have received. What gives me the motivation to choose that? I've already discussed in the section 1 and section 2. One is the material aspect for the photonic devices. Another is a photodetector, because I have to overcome the conventional photodetectors and to find out certain novel photodetectors. So with those limitations of the novel materials and with the limitations of the contemporary materials and contemporary device structures, we try to do with the germanium tin heterophototransistor with the advantages of direct band gap, tin concentration of 6% more than CMOS compatible, high absorption spectra, high mobility, high gain, high spectral responsivity. We also have seen it's provide low noise and high signal to noise ratio with a very low voltage of operation, with a base emitter voltage of only 1.5 volt. I try to develop 3 approaches of the methodology of the analysis. One is a MATLAB based analysis for basically the noise and the frequency analysis, as well as every basic analytical analysis. PSpice or any simulation based circuitry, we develop the DC equivalent circuitry of our proposed devices to get the similar kind of results and to cross verify whether our proposed devices are working proper or not. Also try to do a COMSOL multiphysics based simulation based work. So analytical, simulation and circuit based, all kinds of a work we just want to develop so that we can get a good cross verification of all our methodologies, since experimental facilities we don't have. And these are the basic technical parameters with which we have started this performance analysis of this heterojunction phototransistor. So this is the basic structures: a normal 3-terminal heterojunction bipolar transistor, common emitter mode operating, large current gain over the pin diodes. These are the advantages with improved receiver sensitivity, emitter signal to noise ratio. There is no generation of excess noise. Advantages over the avalanche photodiode. Very high responsivity. With the proper optimization, it can achieve 100 ampere per watt. Low operation voltage, high bandwidth of operation of 60 gigahertz, high gain almost 100 is achieved. And the present project mainly focuses on HPTs related to physical processes, noise frequency responses, circuit model. And the table shows the basic characteristics of the doping concentration, thickness, material of the various layers. Since developing germanium tin directly on silicon is a little difficult, so we have first tried to grow on a germanium virtual substrate, then over the silicon substrate, so that the developed strain can be as minimum as possible. So this is a very typical equation or theoretical equations which we have solved. I'm not going into all those details and the mathematics. So let's jump into the results which we had tried to find. So first we try to do certain analytical, the static characteristics. So we have tried to plot the small signal current gain, the optical current gain versus the small signal current gain with the increasing base width, the small signal current gain and the optical gain with the increasing base doping, where it shows as the optical gain lowers with larger base width. Of course, if the base width is larger, the base recombination of the electron and hole increases, and that provides further gain. Optical gain decreases, however, the electrical gain increases. Similarly, if we can plot the photocurrent density, the lower 2 plots, photocurrent density versus the collector width at the optical power, at large current, collector current, the base recombination by the optically generated excess carriers, excess electron hole pairs, limit the optical gain to become constant, and it provides almost a constant gain. The most promising results come into these 3 results: collection efficiency and the spectral response, So we have seen as we increase the teen concentration from 0 to 10%, we have further increased. The absorption coefficient makes a rate shifts with increasing teen content that due to increased the increased density of the states, and that provides much higher absorption. And if we look at the spectral response of the plot, the teen concentration more than 2% provides a cutoff wavelength extended beyond the 1675 nanometer. Our main aim was a 1.55 or 1550 nanometer to have a look at the present day telecommunication wavelength, but we find a result up to beyond the 1675 nanometer, which fully provides a fiber optic telecommunication band and also extends its operation up to mid-infrared region. A very good amount of optical absorption coefficient of 10 to the power 4 per centimeter we have obtained, which is almost comparable in case of an Indian gallium arsenide 3,5 compound 1.5 into 10 to the power 4 per centimeter. And that ensures, yes, germanium tin can be an alternative potential candidate for the photonic devices. And if we increase the tin concentration further 6%, proper mid-infrared band operation shows with a very low loss of 0.1 dB per kilometer with an amplifier bandwidth of 22 terahertz. The electron collection efficiency, which we have also observed with increasing tin concentration, which we have also find very good, 6.78% at 1.55 micrometer. Although theoretically it's very good, I'm sure when we go for the practical implementation, due to various parasitic effects or other practical effects, there will be definitely a reduction in all those efficiencies and the spectral responses. We try to do a simulation model or try to develop a complete simulation model through the COMSOL multiphysics, where finite element based methods have been used, and we try to develop the electrical potential variations, dimensions, electric field variations, and try to obtain the similar kind of static characteristics, the increase of the current with the base emitter voltage with different bias voltages, where ensures a very, this saturated portion ensures a very wide region of operation of the photodetector. That means wide depletion region, a very wide region, that means from almost 0.12 volt to almost 0.45 volt of base emitter voltage, you can faithfully operate your device, and decrease in the gain on increasing the base width due to increase in the recombination of the base region, which increases the base current. So it also provides a proper transistor nature, the increment in the current, which ensures our proposed HPD is also showing the proper transistor characteristics. We also have plot the collector current versus the collector voltage, which gives a perfect transistor characteristics with cutoff and other regions, cutoff saturation, active and saturation regions, proper the transistor behavior, the current gain relationship versus the increasing collector current, base voltages are also at per the theoretical prediction. And then once we become confident in our proposed model that it is somewhat working towards the 3,5 base compounds, then we started doing certain advancement. So instead of a bulk germanium tin HPT, we have incorporated multiple quantum 8 or 16 multiple quantumals we have used with 17% of tin concentration in the well and 15.5% of the tin gradually increasing within the barrier. And by incorporating the multiple quantumel within the germanium tin base, obviously, what is the purpose of the multiple quantumel? Multiple quantumel is nothing but the advanced feature of the heterojunction itself, where the dimension becomes the comparable with the de Broglie wavelength, becomes very narrow. So more and more amount of electron and hole recombination occurs within a small narrow region, and that automatically gives a perfect conversion of the photon to the electron with a sharp intensity of the rising in the current. So that provides the Gummel plot deep in the base current with a VB in 0.11 volt initially observed, because at the base collector region, the photogenerated holes are injected due to the optical absorption. So within the quantum well, they are first collecting all the electrons. After that, the excess flow of holes started and the negative base current little observed. and they ensure the increased amount of current as we increase the base emitter voltage, the typical current voltage
Samrata,
relationship.
ನಾನು ಖರೇಬಿ
Of course,
ರಾತ್ರಿ ಹೊಟ್ಟಿನ ಹೇಳತ್ತಿತ್ರಿ
uh,
ಸೀರಿಯಸ್ಲಿ
please,
ಹೇಳತ್ತಿನ
you please mute your microphone. You please mute your microphone. Thank you. So with the application of different quantum wells, whether we are achieving current gain, because the incorporation of the quantum well only ensures higher amplifications, more and more amount of electrons are being collected. So that's why we try to develop, and we use these much of a well barrier base doping and the wavelength, and we compared that the single quantum well provides a higher gain, multiple quantum well after that, and of course without quantum well the bulk provides a lower gain. Although that result is not that satisfactory, because single quantum well is providing higher gain, which should not be, because the multiple quantum well should provide much higher gain. The maximum gain at 0.1095 volt and rapidly falls with increasing VBE in case of a single quantum well. In case of a multiple quantum well, shows a peak but attains a somewhat constant value for higher values of VBE. And with increasing number of quantum wells, there is more absorption of light at the base, so enhanced performance and wide region of operation is observed. Although in case of a multiple quantum well, there is a wide region of operation is observed after the gain falls, a stable and wide region of gain. Whereas if you look for a single peak rise, a single quantum well provides much higher gain. Although we are still working on that, which should not be done. When we're talking about the photodetectors is always detecting or conversion of the photons into electrons, then one of the major contributing practical aspect which deteriorates the performance of the detector, that is the presence of the noise. Thermal noise, dark current noise, short noise or quantum noise, all those things. So we decided to overview of the noise characteristics and the signal to noise ratio on the germanium tin heterophototransistor as well. So in that aspect, we try to develop the right-hand side two plots, various noise components with the increasing frequency, because whenever we apply a AC small signal for further amplification or for the conversion, then the frequency of operation comes into the picture, and we try to plot it down, all the components of the noise, the different components of the noise, N1, N2, N3 with the base collector junction, emitter base junction, all those noises, and it observed the increase in the short noise power at the base collector junction occurs because the small signal current gain decreases for frequency increase of more than 1 gigahertz due to huge RC effect, or moreover the parasitic RC effect, and the decrease in the short noise power at the base emitter junction with increasing frequency due to decrease in the small signal current gain. Although we haven't included the flicker noise because those are in a very small frequency range, and we are mostly targeting our operation in the high frequency range. So we have omitted the flicker noise. And with the amalgamation or with the output from various noise components variation, we finally plotted the small signal to noise ratio with the increasing frequency for tin concentration of 8% and 13%. Although we have calculated for various tin concentration, we have shown only for the 2 tin concentration, where of course, if we gradually increase the tin concentration, the signal to noise ratio provides much higher, and this higher signal to noise ratio obviously ensures a good detection capability of the photodetectors. We try to find it out, the effects of incident optical power in the signal to noise ratio. So as the signal to noise ratio increases with the optical power, which induces more photogenerated carriers due to increase in the output signal power, and the photogenerated current induces short noise current at the base emitter and base collector junction. So these the lower hand left hand side table gives you a comparison of the signal to noise ratio of an indium gallium arsenide based and germanium tin based HPTs. And if you look carefully for different doping concentration, there is hardly or very merely difference between a germanium tin device and an indium gallium arsenide based HPT device. Indium gallium arsenide-based HPD devices, there are many research articles we have taken from the literatures and try to compare with our proposed germanium tin devices, which further ensures, yes, our proposed device is working fine. And we also have done the SNR comparison for the multiple quantum oil, single quantum oil, and bulk HPTs to check what kind of a signal to noise ratio improvement are being provided, where definitely the multiple quantum oils provided for different frequency of operation, better operation. Although in case of a current gain, it was a little lack of certain things which we have to find out. The responsivity and the quantum efficiency, the effect of interface and the defects on the sensitivity, we try to do plot it down. So we have plotted the responsivity and the quantum efficiency with the increasing diffusion length. So we have seen after a certain amount of diffusion length, 0.5 of LP micrometer, the efficiency and the responsivity starts going down, but up to that much of a diffusion length, or in turn up to that carrier lifetime, we can get a good amount of responsivity of the quantum efficiency. As I told you, then finally, we have also tried to develop an equivalent circuit model of the germanium tin HPT. So we have done the analytical one, the simulation one, and then we try to develop through a simple HSpice or LTSpice circuit level. We try to develop with incorporating all those noise sources in terms of the equivalent AC sources. We have chosen arbitrary value of the noises and try to figure it out or customize the performance of our circuitry. We have plotted the current variations with the base bias voltages and try to find it out the signal to noise ratio difference or a comparison in this table from the equivalent circuit model and the COMSOL simulation based multiphysics model with the same tin concentration of 13%. And it also shows, the comparison shows a typical resemblance between the circuit model and the simulation based model, so that to check whether our design circuitry was correct in proposition with our simulated model or not. We have done a little bit of lateral scaling impact on the performance as well. So we try to change the emitter thickness, base thickness, so we can observe that with a small base thickness, there is a reduction in the transit time delay, and with higher emitter thickness, we found a better responsivity and the cutoff frequency for the detector. Although I'm not going into the further analysis of those circuits. And at the end, we did a complete performance comparison of the germanium tin devices, the reference devices, each and everything, to show us a proper comparison with our proposed germanium tin, because it's a completely immature material and novel devices, whether it is in or at par with the other proposed 3.5 devices, normal photodetectors or contemporary photodetectors that are not. And we found this tabular comparison very promising in terms of the various parameters: cutoff frequency, maximum frequency, signal to noise ratio, responsivity, forward transit time, capacitance. Although capacitive effect is a very important effect which we have to take care while we are going to design actually photonic devices or detector devices. Lastly, I just want to touch upon, because enough of work we have, or enough of work is going on. I shouldn't say we have completed, enough of work is going on with photo detector side. So we thought of trying to do a little bit of novel material, germanium tin material, novel transmitting side devices, light emitting devices. So we also have tried to find it out on novel devices. Again, a transistor based transistor, which light emitter, which is known as a transistor laser. Usually what kind of a laser we'll know? We are commonly known with normal lasers, p-n junction diode lasers, where we apply the biases. But transistor laser is a special laser which is also designed in post 2010 experimentally in University of Santa Barbara, USA, by the same person, Nick Holonaik Jr. And his group, and Professor Chang, with his group. Transistor laser, in a similarly like an HPT, they also use a HBT, where they shine certain kind of a light and they receive a dual output, that is an electrical output as well as an optical output. Now there are various parameters you have to control, that with controlling those parameters, whether you can either you can increase optical output and your electrical output will be laser. Otherwise, you can decrease your optical output, your electrical output will be laser. There are various permutations and combinations. Although the normal 3,5 compound based transistor laser has already been done theoretically. Actually, that was my PhD topic. So I completed that with normal 3,5 based compound transistor lasers. And once we have developed a certain bit of knowledge about this novel material, germanium tin based devices, so we started doing this germanium tin based transistor lasers as well. And a very few results we have found, the base threshold result with normal quantum structures, each and everything, the light output power efficiency, the modulation bandwidth, and we started developing very promising result in terms of germanium tin, that is group 4 photonic based light emitters as well. So we have worked upon the group 4 emitter based light detectors, so group 4 material based light emitting devices as well, although the work is still on a progress. So this is in a nutshell a conclusion. Our objective is mainly the transport processes and scattering mechanisms to find in the germanium alloys, tin alloys, where we have found the mobility enhancement prediction has been done. Noise and frequency response of a detector and their possible use in terahertz wavelengths. So we have found the noise and frequency responses very at par and suitable for the use of SWIR, later extendable up to mid-infrared region. Group 4 material-based light emitting devices useful for the optical communication. So proposal for transistor laser at 1.55 micrometer and beyond. Equivalent circuit models, development for the optoelectronic structures, that also we have developed for the HPT with maximum frequency of operation, cutoff frequency with predicted. So that is in a nutshell my work, which I try to discuss. These are my, I should thankful the DST sir from where our project was, Indo-Taiwan Program Projects, Professor Cheng from National Chung Cheng University, my PhD students, although both have graduated till now from NIT Delhi. And thank you very much for listening me, for constantly listening me for 1.5 hours. Thank you. You can ask any question.
There is one question. Thank you, sir. There is one question on chat box. That why we
just a
use
minute.
non-
Just a minute. I will open this.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry, I am not. I do not know. It's not observable for me. Can you please read the question?
Yes. So it is there, sir. Why we use non-zero dispersion shifted fibers in WDM based optical systems?
Non-zero. What is a non-zero dispersion shifted fiber? Or it is what is a dispersion shifted fiber? Let we discuss, and one by one we can answer it.
Is there any alternative available for low power WDM system? This is the complete question, sir. I'm reading it.
Okay, very fine. So whoever asked the question, what is a zero dispersion fiber?
Abhishek God, if you have this mic, you can please ask.
Hello.
Yes, just a minute. I should pause and then I will come back to, yeah, please tell me. Yeah, please tell me.
Abhishek God.
Yes,
you
yes,
can
sir.
ask.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful and knowledgeable session.
Thank you.
Sir, actually, non-zero dispersion fibers are those fibers which have a negligible phase shift. It means when we actually operating on any practical optical communication system, then these fibers have negligible phase shift.
Fine.
But actually they deteriorate the power, overall signal power, means you can say the SNR.
While it is
performance of this
transmitting, definitely the power is getting degraded. Definitely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So my question is that is there any alternative available so that we can replace these non-zero fibers with that alternative, so that there should not be power loss in the output?
As far as I know, although not very much knowledge of the optical communication, present optical fiber communication, but as far as I know, the present technology is more suitable with the semiconductor optical fiber amplifiers. So even they do not bother about the zero dispersion fiber, dispersion shifted fiber, blah, 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 each and everything. They used to do the semiconductor optical amplifiers because one of the major reasons of the power losses in the regenerative repeaters. Due to the transmission, there is a loss, definitely. Apart of that, while we are converting these photons, because regenerative repeaters are what? We have to convert the optical signal into electrical signal. We have to amplify. Then we have to again convert the electrical signal into optical signal. Then again 100 to 80 kilometers, 80 or 100 kilometers we have to transmit. So if we can shift all those with the optical amplifiers, I believe that is the only alternate option at this moment to mitigate your requested problem, as far as I know.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
for the
Anyone else, please? Okay, now the chat box is visible. Yes, please.
Anyone else in the participant, if you have any question, you can ask instead of writing also, you can ask directly.
Yeah, please
if-
feel free. हो सकता है मैं भी आंसर नहीं दे पाऊँ. Don't worry.
Sir,
Yes, please.
apart from sources and detectors, for the other
Yes.
kind of devices also, we use same kind of materials like the multiplexers, switches, and all of it.
Yes, multiplexers, circulators, isolators, Fabry-Peri filters, a lot of devices.
So all those actually use the same kind of materials we discussed.
All those can be developed because if you look, isolator, circulator, marks. Marks is what? Marks is marks or demarks or filters are basically made up of Mach-Zehnder interferometers presently. Mach-Zehnder interferometers are the collection of couplers and few optical fibers where you can create the path length difference to create the phase difference. Yes, so if you can develop with the germanium chain the circulators, then also we can utilize the same technology that will help because the optical fiber is made up of silica. If we can utilize the same material, our production cost will be very, very cheaper. So basically, abhi hum whatever price we are giving the Vodafone, Jio for regular monthly recharges of our networking connections, mobile data, those costs will be very much reduced. Anyone else? Anything?
Any other question? Anyone else? I think it's being a lunch time also, sir.
Sure.
So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very